Have you heard of aflatoxins? Well, have you seen mold on maybe bread? And sometimes it's also invisible, or even on just peanuts, G-nuts, yes. Things you snack on, things you think you're going to feed your body to get it looking healthy and to do a lot for you, could eventually be something that you are giving to your body that could have harm onto your body later on. I am joined by Malaki Villaodera. I am Rita Kanya, and we are not alone.
And we are joined by Mr. Clet Wendui Masiga. I got that right. Yes, and he is the Director for Access and Utilization of Farm Technologies and Innovations at Tropical Institute of Development Innovations. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here again.
Thank you so much. Let's break this down, because most of the times when we buy these goodies, even in the supermarket, we never pay attention to that bit, that you know what, this tin or can of G-nut sauce could be poisonous. So how do we break this down? Just tell us today, what are aflatoxins? Maybe we can start on that point.
Aflatoxins, these toxins that are caused by a fungi or molds, which are common in most of our cereals like maize, sorghum, and groundnuts. They're also common in other foodstuffs, including the cabbages as well.
Cabbages?
Yes.
Wow.
And they are caused by two fungi, and these are the ones we call asparagus flavus, and then asparagus parasitas. Now, those molds, the kind of toxin that are produced, are actually linked to cancers. So when you eat food which has molds, then you're actually subjecting yourself to some kind of cancers. And of recent, we have seen an increased rate of cancers. In Uganda, it's partly because we have been with these things for a long time, and people have not been talking about. But due to increased science and technologies, now medics or laboratories are able now to use the science and tell people that this is what you're suffering from. Otherwise, for several years, this has been with us. And Uganda is actually one of the countries which is known for aflatoxins.
So when we used to think that, oh, but our parents and our grandparents and our forefathers survived all these things because they said there are things we used to eat that you people are not eating now. It's not necessarily that. It's just that they didn't know that they had it. Yeah,
I don't know which parts of Uganda you come from, but in guess where I come from, particularly cancer of the esophagus. Very many people used to suffer that cancer, and they would associate it to some kind of witchcraft. And this is a cancer which would make it difficult for anyone to swallow anything solid. And then people would say they have been bewitched. And then obviously these people would die very miserable days, because you take long sperm and take like 2 months without eating or something. So there's a lot of suffering that took place. Yeah, so we have been with it. And one of the other things that we need to know, as much as we keep saying our forefathers lived longer, it's not necessarily true. Most of these people actually died at the age of between 20 and 30.
Really?
The people who survived longer were generally, they may not have been educated, but they were generally a wealthy group. If you can just take a quick observation, if you have ever been to the villages, those old women that have stayed long, they were either wives of chiefs, you know. People were generally rich. And the connection is that people who are generally wealthy tend to pay attention to what they eat. Take an example of mangoes. When you go to villages, someone will find a rotten mango. You can bite off the other part and throw the other part. But a wealthy person is very unlikely to eat that kind of mango. So that's why you find that those who were really paying attention and were a little healthy wealthy lived longer to perhaps 100 years.
Right, right. Let's just shed some light to maybe the farmer watching us today, because you know that's where the trouble starts. After harvesting, how you then dry your grains, how you then store your grains. What are the permissible standards of this particular processes?
You know, the process of food safety actually starts right from the time of growing the crop. Some of the maize, for example, which is highly infested with aflatoxins, actually get those molds when it is in
the farm.
In the farm. So by the time the farmers harvest, they already have them. Now during the drying process, you know, the grains are being mixed up. So the seed of the fungi will keep now spreading across the entire grain. Then also, sometimes because of the drying process, what the farmer is using to dry is perhaps a dirty surface. Now that dirty surface has these molds. Now the molds get into the grain. Now by the time the farmer is thinking of either processing or actually selling this grain, it is heavily infested. And research done in Uganda actually shows that 40% or more than 40% of the maize is actually having aflatoxins.
Whoa. Really?
Yes. And these aflatoxins are very difficult to get rid of. Eventually they get into, once it is milled, they are right in there. During the cooking, it's believed they are very difficult, they cannot be killed.
If the problem then starts at the farm point, how then do we avoid this?
Manage the process. There are obviously several ways, but right now, some of the studies that have been done is to develop crops that are actually genetically resistant to aflatoxin attack. Like
Dr. You and genetics, eh?
Yes.
Okay.
Like you know, like the molds that attack while the crop is in the garden, there are some factors. For example, if a seed is damaged, a maize seed is damaged while then it creates a situation where it can hold some moisture, and that environment becomes very good for the fungus to spread. So now what genetics are doing is, how do we develop a maize grain that is actually genetically resistant to attack by this?
As we try and develop that bit, and as we look past the farmer, because this eventually ends up on a number of people's tables or in a number of people's mouths. Now let's say the maize.
You could have eaten some today.
You know, and who knows? It could have, because when was the last time you bought a roadside maize? There's that.
Yeah.
It's also in traffic jam, there's a lady who's always hawking maybe G-nuts. You're going to eat that as well. So if the farmer has missed it out, I, as a consumer, what can I do to make sure I protect myself from these aflatoxins?
No, what is going on now is the Bureau of Standards. There is now, like country like Uganda, there is now an increased attention for them to do random sampling and check whether the materials that are getting into the food system are safe or not. But because of the nature of our market system, it's very difficult to track. But in countries where most of what we consume goes through well-organized systems like supermarkets, it becomes very easy, because before anything gets into the food chain, they actually assess it. Recently, I was actually reading an article, peanuts from Uganda that were, I think, supplied to a supermarket in the UK. They found they had higher levels of aflatoxins, so they said this cannot get into the food system. The World Health Organization has set a limit. I think, I've set a limit at 20 parts per million. So if they found that any material that you have has more than that, then it is not safe for human consumption.
Right.
But most of the samples that have been taken in Uganda, like for groundnut, the pest one, it has up to 60%. Aflatoxins, the samples collected, but the seed of groundnuts has about 50%. So most of the groundnut that you would find actually on the market or even at home, there's a 60% chance that's actually infected.
As we come to a close, let's just look at practical solutions that are pretty much affordable or within the reach of most of the farmers. You did mention that genetics, the change of that could be a solution, but what's the quick solution, go-to solution for farmers now that we know that the problem actually starts with the grain in the farm?
The first one is post-harvest handling, where a farmer should be trained to select the right crops. Those are the ones that should get into the food system. Then the bad ones are basically discarded. Incidentally, even if they are milled and given to animals, it eventually gets into our food chain because the animals will eat it to remain in their system.
Right. Then
we shall eat it in the food. So the best ones is to sort out what is good. That's why you find most of these organized food processors, they have people who actually sort.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Remember the hashtag is Morning at NTV across all the social media platforms. Doctor, I'm sure you look at those feedback and get to answer to some of those, because we know we have quite a lot of farmers who are watching today. Let's be deliberate this year about watching what we sell, how we handle our grain. Now, thank you so much, Mr. Clet Masiga, Director of Access and Utilization of Farm Technologies and Innovations at Tropical Institute of Development. Morning at NTV still continues. Don't go too far.